My name is Laura Bonamici, Global Head of Marketing at Fujitsu, and I'm delighted to be your moderator for this webinar. Today, we're going to dive into a critical topic, transforming leadership for a changing world. As AI accelerates and global challenges intensify, leadership is being redefined. And in this session, we'll explore how purpose-driven leaders can harness technology to create real impact and help shape a net positive future. We're incredibly fortunate to be joined by two remarkable leaders who are at the forefront of this transformation. First, we have Paul Polman, an internationally recognized leader in sustainable business and co-architect of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. As CEO of Unilever, Paul proved that purpose-driven long-term strategies can deliver outstanding results. And today, through his board roles, impact investments, and his best-selling book, Net Positive, he continues to champion responsible leadership and accelerate progress towards a more sustainable future. Paul's work has reshaped how business understands its responsibility and its opportunities, and he has recently ranked #1 in the Thinkers 50 2025 list, recognizing his profound influence on global leadership thinking. So Paul, an honor to have you with us today. Joining us is Paul. Joining Paul in conversation, we have Shin Shuda, Global CEO and Senior Managing Partner of Uvance Wayfinders by Fujitsu. Uvance Wayfinders is the global consulting business which Fujitsu designed to guide organizations through complex business and technological transformations. And Shin brings extensive experience in leading transformation across industries from strategy to execution, with a unique focus on leveraging advanced technologies, particularly AI, to deliver real measurable outcomes. So Shin, thank you for joining us today.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
So together we'll explore how purpose and technology mutually reinforce each other, translating vision into tangible impact, and how leaders can drive both net positive and AI transformation, bringing strategy together with diligent, real-world action to create lasting value. So let's dive right into our first topic, from vision to measurable impact. And Paul, I would like to start with you. The concept of net positive has become a cornerstone of sustainable business. So could you please elaborate on what net positive truly means and why net positive leadership is so vitally important for leaders navigating this ever-changing world today?
Well, thank you, Laura, and obviously good to see Shin as well. And I was looking forward to this conversation. We all know that the world is now being stressed. There's no question about it. I would say climate change and inequality are probably some of our biggest challenges that we have to deal with. It drives discord. It pushes people back into poverty. And in fact, the cost that we are incurring, including in businesses, is rapidly rising. So no better example to take than the health of this planet. And as a result of, for example, climate change, we see human health being affected. We see food prices being fluctuating. We see insurance costs going up. And every day, everywhere, somewhere in the world, we have to deal with these rising costs of natural disasters. The scientists have mapped the health of our Earth systems into 9 crucial, what we might call life support systems. Think about climate change, think about biodiversity loss, think about land use change or deforestation, fresh water availability, ocean acidification, and the list goes on. Unfortunately, 7 of these 9 indicators are outside of what we would call the safe zone. That's one of the reasons why we are projecting to 2.6 degrees global warming in the Celsius scale. We are just passing the 1.5 degrees, and we already see the enormous negative effects of that. And costs, as I said, are rapidly going up. Now, the bulk of the global economy is in the private sector. We also recognize that on the political level, everywhere in the globe, to manage these issues collectively is very difficult. But the private sector, being the main emitter of climate change or actually deforestation and some of these other drivers, is also ultimately responsible. So the book Net Positive tries to bring in the concept of running your businesses moving forward in what I would call a regenerative, restorative, reparative way. It's a mindset change as much as a leadership change. It's putting humanity back in the center of business. And it's a simple concept transformative in practice, I believe, but obviously hard to do. It means running a company in a way that improves the well-being of every system you touch, your people, your communities, nature itself, the broader economy. It actually means giving back more than you take, a concept that's difficult to understand, but it is not only doing less harm, but actually moving your business models to actively doing good. So for a long time, the dominant mindset might have been sort of ESG, environmental, social, and governance, about lowering emissions, having less waste, fewer harm in your value chain, if you want to. But it is clear that as we have overshot these planetary boundaries, that simply isn't sufficient anymore. We really need to move to a restorative world. And net positive really helps companies move from this myopic focus of shareholder primacy to a broader stakeholder focus, very much actually embedded in the Japanese Sampo Yoshi concept, which is the meaning is good for sellers, good for buyers, but also good for society. Moving from a competitive mindset to a collaborative mindset, moving from short-termism to actually thinking intergenerational and as a steward of the businesses, from risk avoidance or seeing it as a cost, moving to seeing it as an investment and probably the biggest opportunity that we have for humanity. Technology is there. I would argue the financial resources are there. So the biggest challenge really is a leadership challenge. If you operate your leadership under fear, you build fearful institutions. If you operate your leadership from denial, you build blind systems. If you operate from cynicism, you corrode trust. But ultimately, it's the leaders that operate with courage, leaders that operate with clarity, then the organization is building the capabilities to make what I would call extraordinary progress. And that's really the philosophy of net positive. We can talk about it a little bit more, but it builds trust, which is the oxygen for any business. It reduces risks and reduces the cost of capital. It attracts and retains the best talents. It gives you more resilient supply chains, and it drives innovation. And I don't have to tell you, obviously, Laura, that ultimately it also translates into better results. Hard work, a lot of elements of a business you need to change, but increasingly we're having the tools to do that. And one of the great tools that Shin is obviously much more of an expert on is AI itself.
Very good. Thank you so much for the introduction. So Shin, let me move to you. Paul touched on a number of things, and towards the end, when we're talking about leadership, more specifically around trust and clarity, and I would argue purpose, right? You know, that was very much the message, the sentiment behind. So the challenge of translating purpose into measurable outcome is particularly relevant for businesses striving to be net positive. But from the perspective of Uvance Wayfinders, where do you see the biggest challenge or opportunity, perhaps, in doing this, in translating purpose into measurable outcomes, both from a business and societal point of view? And how does your consulting team guide organizations that are struggling with this translation?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think what Paul was just talking about resonates a lot with Fujitsu and who we are. I think that we've done a lot of research in data and AI by itself, but when we think about data AI, the computing power that it needs, the energy needs that it has, is going to be enormous, and it's talked about a lot. But the thing about Fujitsu is that while we're building data AI capabilities, we're also building computing power that is very efficient. So if you think about our Monaca chip, it takes fraction of the energy that a similar computing power requires. So, sorry. I think I resonate with a lot of what Paul said, and I think that's sort of the DNA that we have. So, from that perspective, Fujitsu has a lot of purpose, and I think most world-class organizations have a purpose. But purpose alone doesn't really give you, the actual actions that you have to take, and that comes down to the what. So in order to accomplish the purpose that you want, what are those things that we need to do? And the thing with AI is that it accelerates that process, and that's the biggest thing. Is going from purpose to outcomes. Leveraging AI is going to get you there much faster. Now it's going to make a lot of mistakes as well, but you have to be able to, encompass that and be able to actually work with it. I think the twist that we have with AI is that once we get to what we call a true agentic AI stage, where data availability is very good and AI can actually start thinking about the business process itself, it's going to change it. So the way humans do it today is going to change drastically. And it's less about, humans losing jobs. It's really not about that. It's really about changing the way we do work, and AI is going to do it. Um, we are not there yet, but it's going to get there pretty soon. And so when you think about that, the biggest challenge that we have is the human side. You know, some functions or process is going to see huge changes with true agentic AI in place, and it's gonna make a world of difference. It's gonna allow humans to think about other things, be more creative, work with other humans. And in that sort of stage, what's going to be really important is our insights, our leadership, our ability to change, work with culture, lead others, really adapting is going to be the key thing. And at Uvance Wayfinders, just because we are embedded in the Fujitsu's DNA and the purpose that we have for the society, we actually see that from end to end. We know what the purpose is. We understand what that means. We also understand that, at the end of the day, you have to deliver, as in you have to implement these data AI stacks and be able to use it and be able to use it multiple times in order to get results. So, and that's really embedded in the DNA of Fujitsu. And it's not something that I created or my team created. It's been with Fujitsu for a very long time, and we're just adopting it.
Very good. Thank you, Shin. And we'll come back to some of these points in our conversation today. So, Paul, in this part, we wanted to explore from vision to measurable impact. So maybe if we can give some concrete advice, if you like, specific steps the leaders can take to prioritize and integrate their positive thinking directly into their core business systems and decision-making process. What would you say is the most critical initial action if you're getting somebody to get started?
So let me first say I very much agree with Shin that, and by the way, in Fujitsu, you've always had a strong purpose. I went back into the history, and when your company was split off from electricity providers and you started focusing on more technology and connecting people in the age of communication, that was a very strong purpose. Building sustainable organizations through trust and innovation is even more important. AI is an incredible tool to help you accelerate, as Shin was explaining. But we see that in a world that has a trust deficit, working with organizations that have as their core purpose, like Fujitsu has, actually that building of trust is an important element. Now, purpose is probably the main thing that gives you direction in a very volatile world, that gives you courage to go outside of your comfort zone, that allows you to set targets that probably are a little bit bigger than you otherwise would have done. And Nietzsche, the philosopher, said it very well when he said, he who has the why to live can bear almost any how. So it's the what's and hows are probably easier to explain. But the energy that comes in an organization is about the why. In Unilever, that was making sustainable living commonplace. All of the brands that we were selling had a bigger mission. If we were selling a toilet bowl cleaner, it was to attack the issues of open defecation that 1.5 billion people still suffer from in this world. If we were selling a bar soap to wash your hands, it was actually helping a child reach the age of 5 by attacking infectious diseases like diarrhea or pneumonia. So don't underestimate the power, if you want to, of the purpose and how that unlocks business models and how that unlocks engagement in the company. Now, change is not easy. There's no question about it. And most of the change efforts that happen in the world are actually failing, unfortunately. There is short-term pressure very clearly now that pulls a lot of companies back. The beauty of Japanese companies, by the way, a country with more companies that are 100 years old or more than any other country in the world, has always been this more longer term. But short-termism is pulling people back and prevents us from doing the right changes that we need to do. We have the vested order pushing back. We very much see that in the area of climate change. Then you have governments where obviously you need the right directions and frameworks to drive change, but governments right now struggle, and there's a lack of consistency, which is very difficult for business then to make policies around. And then the last but not least that the people will be familiar with is the famous prisoner's dilemma. Sometimes you have to invest. And if you're the first one, it might cost you a little bit more money, or you give your competitors a free hand. So change processes are very difficult, but it starts with that purpose. It starts with unlocking that courage to get out of your comfort zone. And the first thing we did in Unilever was say we need a long-term business model. We need to take responsibility for our total impact in the world. And we need to run a business model where we can honestly say, by growing our businesses, we improve the world, not making it less worse. So the first step that you do after you've set a broader vision in Unilever making sustainable living commonplace, we measured our impact across the value chain to see where we had our biggest negative impacts or positive impacts and where we could make the biggest impact, if you want to. Then we focus on that impact and put targets around that. I took the position that the targets should be as a minimum in line with what the science is telling you, not targets you can just get away with. So, for example, on climate, that means being net zero by 2050 in your emissions to stay in line with the Paris agreements, for example. Once you have made these targets public, you discover that it is probably difficult to reach alone. So you start forming the partnerships with the right people who are aligned with you around these objectives. And then, last but not least, once you have these partnerships, you start building trust by doing it in a transparent way. You put feedback loops in place and all that stuff. Now, with Unilever, over the 10-year period, we not only became the most sustainable company in the world, twice the levels of Patagonia, we not only moved our engagement scores to the top of the top tercile, but we also produced about a 300% shareholder return in these 10 years. But it wasn't easy. There were some things that worked for us, and probably some things I would do differently if I had to start again. The first one that works and that is so important is put purpose at the core of your business model. Put sustainability at the core of your business model. When we see some pressures in society now, we see companies moving backwards. The question is why? It gives you an indicator that it wasn't probably core of their business. But we can clearly show now, also in the financial markets, that companies that put purpose and sustainability at the core of their strategies are actually performing better. Not surprisingly, because they're positioning themselves better for this sustainable, more equitable, more inclusive future we want. The second thing you do, you embed it in everything you do, not only in your brands, but it has to be in finance, in procurement, in marketing. Everything you do has to be aligned with that. That's hard work. It requires changing incentive systems. It requires training. It requires taking bottlenecks away. I always say the role of a leader is to work on the forest, not in the forest. And then you have to make the hard choices. You have to stay the course, even if there is short-term pressure or if there are immediate requirements. They cannot come at the expense of a company's values, of a company's long-term strategy. In Unilever, the bigger challenges that we faced were probably explaining the value creation model to the financial market. I think it's easier now because the evidence that we have now is far more overwhelming than what we had 15 years ago. Technology that is available, including AI, that Shin obviously has explained, gives you far more tools to do something about it. The other challenge is that it's good to have a business model where you positively influence the world, but you have to be sure that it is anchored in firm performance. If there is no performance, ultimately you cannot have these positive impacts either. So finding that right balance between performance and impact is absolutely crucial. And then the last thing is working in partnerships, especially these more transformative partnerships, is not always easy. because you might have to hear sometimes the inconvenient truths. You might have to work with partners who bring in other perspectives you haven't necessarily thought about, or don't want to enter in the equation. It makes it sometimes more complex. But if you can work your way through it, then the opportunities are there and the sky opens. So ultimately, actually, it boils down, as you rightfully say, to the leadership and the tone from the top, and how we help organizations achieve these far more audacious goals and objectives that are needed, but also ultimately result in reward. And what I found in Unilever, the best driver again of that leadership is a very strong purpose that everybody buys into. The first year in Unilever, we not only made hopefully the right decisions to put the business back on track, made the right acquisitions to keep growing, ensure that our product quality is superior to our competitors, our innovation process working for us. But at the same time, we spend a lot of time on working on the individual purpose of people and the collective purpose for impact. Because you cannot have a successful or a sustainable company if people are not themselves sustainable, or you cannot have a purpose driven company if people themselves struggle with their purpose. It was Rumi, the 13th century poet from Iran, who said, "Yesterday I was clever, I tried to change the world. Today I am wise, I'm changing myself." So any of these change processes starts with an investment in the individuals, and that's often forgotten. Also in AI, AI is an incredibly powerful tool. If it's used as a force for good, it can really help us change many things and address many of the challenges that we currently face in society. And Fujitsu is very well placed for that. But the first requirement for that, obviously, is that you have a strong purpose guided by strong values and ethics to be sure that that is used in the right way. And you've seen many debates about that. And you as a company have thought about that and are a leader in its responsible application, I would say.
Thank you. A lot there. Thank you, Paul, and a lot to unpack. So maybe, so with purpose to unlock courage, I think we all agree with that. Moving into measurement, targets, and partnership. Perhaps we can pick up from there, because we started to touch on AI as a tool, as a sort of co-pilot. So how can we really leverage in AI in an effective way to kind of bridge that strategy to delivering, ultimately the strategy to delivery gap, and move from all this insightful data to real world actions that can continue to drive the kind of improvement and progress that Paul is talking about.
You know, while Paul was explaining the big endeavors that you did at Unilever, it reminded me of a client that we have here in Japan, actually. Fujitsu is a 90-year-old company, but there are lots of companies that are older than us, and one of them is actually more than 100 years. That happens to be one of our clients. And they are actively adopting AI. And this is a very old company. They've been doing the same thing for a very long time, but they have a very strong purpose. And its purpose, I'm not going to get into it, but the purpose has to do with their customers and their products that they sell. So when they talked about AI, they were not interested in using AI for finance process or HR process or procurement for that matter. They went straight to their purpose. They wanted to improve supply chain risk management, because if they have risk, they're going to fail on delivery to their customers, and that is their purpose. And improving fulfillment and improving quality, and those are things that they actually went first. So yeah, that was very interesting. I spent a lot of time in the U.S., and I think one of the first things that most of our clients started adopting for AI was back office, and trying to get costs out. Not for this client over here, because their purpose is very clear. And because of that, they're making a lot of outcomes. And I mean, I think they have probably 80 agents working in supply chain alone. And for a 100-year-old company to adopt via doing that is quite remarkable. And we never really talk about it, but it's the adoption comes from purpose. I just wanted to kind of talk about that, how important that is. But at the end of the day, it does come back to the humans who are using it, right? If I think about the clients that I just talked about, they are ready to embrace it. They're not fearful. because they have a purpose, they know exactly how they want to use it, but they also understand its limitations. AI is not all encompassing at this point. It relies on good data. And you can imagine we have a lot of data in most companies. Some are good, some are useless. Some are batch process, some are real time. There's all kinds of different data, and be able to use that all together as one is not an easy endeavor. And I think to have the purpose, but also understand the limitations of AI actually creates that gap. It actually fills that gap between strategy and delivery. That's my point of view.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think what Shin is saying is the companies that I'm on the board with and the companies I work with would very much try to aspire to, and I say deliberately aspire, because many are clearly not there yet. But if you can link it to purpose, AI and data can be extraordinary enablers of progress if they are reused with purpose. And this is your client that you work with is a great example. I think the leadership skills in today's world of systems thinking and courage and long-termism and partnership and what I might call intelligent risk-taking very much go also with the way you have to approach technology or you have to approach AI. And it's going so fast that many people are in the freeze or fear mode or in a nearly a negative spiral. And it takes that leadership to move it actually into an ambition possibility spiral. But I've always felt, even in Unilever, that technology itself is actually not the disruptor. Everybody's talking about AI as the disruptor, but it's actually an amplifier of what you're trying to do. It makes good systems better and it makes broken systems worse. And, the integrity of the outcome is also a function of how it is used and what goes in it. But I've seen it rapidly develop, and you've played a key role in that, in AI also tackling some of these world challenges that companies are facing. It can map very quickly now complex supplier networks. It can look at human rights or deforestation in your value chain in real time. It can process hundreds of thousands of documents from suppliers, probably in seconds, or if not in minutes. It can give you the scope 3, which is the scope where most of the emissions happen. And I'm very excited to see that, there's a potential unlock in the economy in many of the areas where we are worried about right now. I know AI takes a lot of energy right now to service our needs, but people have done the studies that 3 to 6 gigatons of carbon emissions can actually be avoided thanks to AI. Think about precision agriculture. Think about the move to electric vehicles. Think about optimization of carbon intensive processes where AI plays a key role. So it's not surprising that the bulk of the Fortune 500 companies are going to spend more on AI and are using that very deliberately to address some of these key issues. So, but at the same time, I think, why do you need companies like yourselves? If you look at the studies, people start to realize that many of the investments they make in this digital transformation are not giving them the successes that they were expecting, and partly because it's ill-defined. It's not grounded in what you're trying to achieve, or your purpose, or your culture isn't adapted. So working with a company like yours that does an entire end-to-end process in implementing AI is an absolute need that companies are looking for. And again, it takes courage in a sense, because it is a partnership that is quite different than just handing over something like many do and say, here it is, now figure it out yourself. So this implementation part, this trust part, this grounding it in what you stand for as a company long term are going to be key drivers of success. There's no question about that.
And maybe let's stay for a minute on the on this topic on driving, delivering real transformation. Maybe Shin, if I can bring you back in on this point about end to end and this end to end approach to drive true, truly transformative change. How we're talking about AI, but we're talking about AI in the context of having a strong purpose to move us forward. So how can AI help us scale that impact end to end, And how do you ensure that empathy guides every step? So especially when dealing with human elements of change management and fear around AI adoption, right? Because there's a lot of that at the moment. So how do you deal with that with your team when you work with customers?
Yeah. So, thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we do. But, the thing that's different about Wayfinders is that we're within Fujitsu. And Fujitsu obviously is a technology company where we have abundance of data, AI, computing, network, technology, tech stack. My God, the kind of engineers and researchers that we have in our company is just top of the line. One of my tasks, our task, is to make sure that we can bring our proprietary tech stack to the world and bring it to customers. So when you think about the tech stack that we have, it is actually built on our purpose. The word trusted, responsible, being sustainable, those are all embedded in everything we do. In terms of AI, our technologies span across connectivity, sustainability, being ethical, being able to explain what AI did is very important, right? For us to adopt AI. We're not going to blindly adopt AI. It needs to be explainable so they can tell us what it did. It's got to be sovereign too. I think a lot of our clients are asking for sovereign environments. They want to be able to control their data, their governance, how AI works within that. So those are things that we've been researching for probably 20 years. It's always embedded in our purpose, and our job is actually bring that to the market. But that DNA that we have for Fujitsu is actually in our DNA for delivery as well, because the other DNA that we have for Fujitsu it's hard to explain in English. It is very easy in Japanese, but it's essentially saying that we're going to finish what we started. It is embedded in our every move, everything that we do for our customers. We don't end with advising customers what to do. That's not work. The work gets there when you actually be able to implement what the customers want. And not only that, the customers have to use it, and the customers have to use it for a while in order to get their returns on investments. And that's how we think about everything we do at Fujitsu, is to make sure that our customers get what they ask for, get something even better than what they ask for, embedded with our DNA and our purpose in that system, right? And that's what we strive to do. And the fact that it is our culture to actually finish what we actually started, that goes with our customers too. We stick with them. We don't leave them. We make sure that they finish and able to use it. So that in Wayfinders, we are a consulting capability. So we are going to bring our consulting skills to the table as well. One of the things that Fujitsu may be lacking before we came is that we're very customer oriented. So the customer may want to build a system that they think is the best way to do it. Fujitsu in the past may have said, you know what, we'll build you exactly what you wanted. But today, with the consulting capability in place, we are going to bring a different point of view. You might want to do it this way. You might want to use AI to do this part of what you were trying to build. This will make it more cost effective, but also you're going to get a better quality outcome. Those are things that we bring to the table. But at the end of the day, we live within Fujitsu's purpose and Fujitsu's DNA.
Thank you, Shin. So we've been talking about purpose, culture, relationships, ecosystem. So perhaps we end on a more specific final question on leadership. And Paul, we started with that in the context of net positive, but maybe if we can expand on that, and talk a little bit about the leadership mindset for this changing world. What would you say are the specific qualities and the mindset shift that are paramount today to effectively driving both the net positive agenda as well as the AI transformation? And Paul, if I can start with you.
No, I appreciate the question, Laura, because it's an important one. When COVID came, we saw clear bifurcation in business models. Businesses that were run for the long term, multi-stakeholder, embraced purpose, put sustainability at the core of their businesses, were doing much better than the ones that were myopically focused on the quarters and only on one stakeholder, which was called the shareholder. But for the first time, we also saw a bifurcation in leadership. Leaders with a higher sense of humanity, humility, empathy, compassion, skills we don't normally talk about. Leaders that had a stronger sense of purpose, understood the power of partnerships and cooperation, and thought longer term, multi generational. Those were the leaders that instilled trust in their workforces in very uncertain times. Those were the leaders that people followed. Those were the leaders that unlocked the energy. So that bifurcation of leadership is clearly there. And in today's world, that leadership is more tested than ever. It is what you do in the dark that makes you shine in the light. But nowadays, we see many companies wavering based on some pressures coming from one or another corner and forgetting their longer term beacon, their true north, or their real values and purpose. So leadership is being tested, and not everybody is passing that test. And you can see anxiety building up in companies and people making choices where to work. So that's probably the most important component of success. Now, AI is a wonderful accelerator. Obviously, you can use AI to reduce cost and drive efficiencies, create new business opportunities, move things faster than you otherwise have done. But you can also use it to get radical transparency, to accelerate these partnerships and joint progress. But technology alone will not make your business more moral, but it can make the moral leadership that we talk about far more faster and scalable if the intent is right. So I think the next generation of competitive advantage will not come from technology alone, but it will come from that combination that Shin talked about of where leaders combine data with purpose, using AI to build trust on top of driving the efficiencies and business successes that we all aspire to. So it's the power of the two. And your roots in Japan, in my opinion, once more, make you better suited for that. And some of the things that Shin was talking about as inherent competitive advantages and values in your business model, including this end to end partnership, I think are advantages that many more companies will be looking for, not only in Japan, where you're very successful, but increasingly
Very good.
also
Thank you,
in the
Paul.
wider world.
Oh, thank you. Shin, anything you would like to add to this final question about leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything with the Paul talked about, I agree with. I think leadership is going to be tested, 100%. The empathy is obviously this foundation of the next generation of leadership. Actually, it's the leadership that we need today, not next generation. But cultural intelligence, I think, is the other one that's going to be important. In a world of, as I said, true agentic AI, a lot of the groundwork is going to be done by AI. We're still going to have to monitor it. We need to understand it. We have to use it, but we're going to spend a lot of time working with each other. Cultural intelligence is going to be very important. I think curiosity is going to be important. Creativity is going to be important. I actually think that those with liberal arts major is actually going to come into play. Having an engineering background, it's very difficult for you to say that, but I think, jokes aside, I think those qualities are going to be important. And also, I think resilience is going to be important because AI is going to make a lot of mistakes too, right? And it's not going to get the outcome you want, but it's very easy to tweak it and do it again. Being able to learn from mistakes and be able to run it multiple times and get to the answer until you get to the answer that you like or the company needs is going to be pretty important. The last point that I want to make is I think leadership doesn't start when you become a manager or a VP. I think leadership starts from the very beginning when you join the company. Even as an associate, I think that leadership qualities are going to be needed because guess what? The associates are going to be using AI every day, right? And the kind of empathy and cultural intelligence that you're going to need is going to start from the very get-go of any organization. And obviously, at the top, it's a must-have, but it's going to start very early. Is my opinion.
Brilliant. So curiosity, creativity, empathy, resilience, all those wonderful skills that I think in the past we referred to as soft skills, right? That they're really coming to the fore and becoming more important than ever. So, Paul, Shin, thank you so much for this incredibly rich and insightful discussion. Just to recap, we explored many topics today. So how leaders can bridge vision with measurable impact by leveraging technology, but grounding it in purpose. We talk about end-to-end delivery and this approach for sustainable transformation to move beyond just advice, but actually implementation and partnerships. And also we touched on some of these leadership mindsets and qualities that will be required. So curiosity, empathy, and collaboration, resilience, etc., that are crucial to thrive in the era of both net positive and AI transformations. So I'm going to use the opportunity before we wrap up to also highlight our commitment, Fujitsu's commitment to net positive, something that isn't just a philosophy for us, but actually a core part of our business strategy. Our vision is to become a technology company that realizes net positive outcomes through digital services, and this has inspired our advancing net positive agenda. I encourage everybody who joined us today to explore this. There's many resources available, the Net Positive Index, an assessment tool, and also change makers who are the leaders who are already on the path on this journey to drive change. Paul Polman, thank you for your inspiring vision and leadership, and thank you, Shin Shuda, for sharing Fujitsu's unique approach to delivering impact and transformation. And of course, a huge thanks to our global audience for joining us today. We hope that this session has provided you with valuable insight and actionable ideas for your leadership journeys. Thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful day.